All right. I think we're going to get started. If you've been in my sessions before, you know I like to get started pretty much on time because I don't want to take any time away from our discussion today. Welcome. If this is your first time joining an IPMI Shop Talk, we welcome you. If this is not your first time, welcome back. This Shop Talk today is primarily and specifically designed for our frontline personnel at all of our organizations. You're very important to what we do and the goals that we have and the tasks we need to accomplish. You are, I would say, the biggest part of it. So we're going to talk today about challenges and successes. Let me just start by saying Happy New Year. I didn't think that a year down the road that we would still be doing this, but we've all learned a lot in this last 12 months, haven't we? And I'm glad you're all still with us. And we hope that this brings you some information that you find useful, something you can apply at your own organization or agency. Today, we are going, I want to introduce you to a couple of folks that are also in the room. If you wouldn't mind waving when I say your name. Justin Grunert. He's also with IPMI staff. He's our training coordinator. And Kim Fernandez, also with IPMI. Hi, Kim. Thank you. They're going to be helping today. Justin's going to be monitoring some of the chat. And if you've got questions or something that you would like brought up, please enter it into chat so that we know you've got something you want to share or ask. I have some questions that I want to ask the group, but I'm hoping that you all lead with the types of things you want to talk about today. All right. We want to hear from you. So if you're not familiar with chat, if you look on your Zoom screen, some of you have it at the top, some at the bottom, but it says chat. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Even if you don't have a question, I'd like everybody, and you're going to see a lot of these, but if you would enter in today, what agency you're with, or what city or region you're calling in from today, where you're joining us from, so that everybody kind of sees just how many folks are here today and from how many different regions. It's kind of amazing. Thank you for doing that. And again, if you've got a question, please enter it into chat. So I am actually going to start out today's conversation talking a little bit about something that I've brought up in past sessions, and I want to kind of see where we are today. And it has to do with remote work or working back in the office. Let me go ahead and launch this poll. Now, you'll be able to respond to this poll. You see it now on your screen. This is anonymous. Nobody knows what your answer is. And there's going to be a couple of these polls today. But which statement for this first poll most closely represents your organization as it is today? Is everybody, all of your team, your coworkers, is everybody still working from home? And you kind of think that's going to keep going for a while? Or is it a combination? Some of the staff are still working from home, some have returned to the office, some combination thereof. Or third option, everybody has returned back to working in the office on a consistent full-time basis. I'll give you just another minute to figure those out and give your answer. Oh, you're still rolling in. Great. Great. Just 10 more seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and show you what the results are. All right. Folks, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll right now. And I want to share the results with you. You can see them on your screen right now. Now, a year ago, not quite a year ago, last beginning of April, end of March, was the first time I asked our frontline staff and our organizations what their answer was to this. And by and large, the overwhelming majority of you said that you were all working from home. Everybody was remote. Nobody was in the office. As you can see now, that's the lowest number. You see that the largest response is that there's a combination. Some are working from home, some are back in the office. This, I think, I believe, and I see if you are with me on this, I think this is going to be the new normal. I think that we're going to continue to see in this industry and in most industries, you're going to see a combination of people still working from home or working remotely, spending some time in the office, some working 100% remotely, some obviously 100% in the office. But I think this is going to be what we see from here on out. We've adjusted to this. You also see that there are 20% of you that have all returned to working in the office. That number was, I believe, 3% of the respondents, roughly the same size group, the first time we ever did this. But as the months have clicked on, more and more people have either returned to the office or this combination approach. But I'll tell you right now, 75% of you having this combination approach is the highest number so far. I don't see this probably going below 50% in the future, or at least not in 2021. All right, glad you could see that. I think that's interesting. I hope you found it interesting too. All right, let's go ahead and let me get into some of the questions that I have for you. I want to first talk, if you wouldn't mind, about curb management. Okay, not a new topic for us in this industry, but there's a different demand for the curb. And I will say in 2020, it changed even more than it had been, and it had been changing for some time. So managing the demands of the curb isn't a new concept for our industry, and frontline staff have definitely seen a different need at the curb in this past year. Things like more short-term use, picking up food from restaurants, other flexible use, or even parklets, where, if you haven't heard the word parklets before, it's where they've moved the seating out on the other side of the curb, taking up parking spaces to let restaurants sort of flow out into the street to have outdoor seating. What I'd like to know is this: what's happening in your area? What are you seeing? Who's willing to share? If you would enter it into chat just to say that you have something on this that you would like to talk about. And actually, I am going to, okay, John Orr from California State University, Los Angeles. John, would you unmute yourself so that everybody can hear you?
Sure.
Thank you.
The biggest things for us are distribution events. So students having to come to campus to pick up equipment from TV, film, science labs, things of that nature, and trying to balance. We're trying to keep them on separate parts of the campus and trying to schedule to make sure they aren't all at the same time. And then putting up signs for COVID protocols at the same time, telling people they have to stay in their car and all of that. And then the other thing we're running into, which is somewhat new, is large distribution events and large vaccination events. So we have a meeting this afternoon to discuss a possible COVID vaccination clinic on campus. And then we have another meeting Thursday for another one. We've done a flu vaccination. It's not completely new. Years ago, I did one with the Red Cross for a mass flu back when the whole anthrax scare was going on. They did a flu vaccination test on our campus to see if they could do it. But yeah, just trying to figure out the logistics for that. How do we get 500 to 1,000 people through here?
Right.
Driving through their cars.
I want to get into that in a little bit too, because we are using some of our structured parking, some of our surface parking lots for some of those events. I agree. John, at your campus, then when, in reference to the curb, the immediate adjacency to some of the more used or busy areas of campus, are you seeing a different use of limited time spaces for things like pick up and drop off? You were talking a little bit about the scheduling of student pickup and drop off. Are there other food service facilities, things like that you're having to accommodate?
Yeah, the thing is it's different lots are being utilized. So in the past, the giant faculty staff lot and the giant student lots were the ones used the most. Now it's the temporary lots. It's the, like one of the favorite distribution spots is the Uber drop-off that we have.
Okay.
So we have a couple areas that were designed for Uber drop-off, but because they have long drive areas and long stacking areas, a lot of people want to use them for distribution now. And shuttle stops. People want to use shuttle stops for distribution. Instead of having students drive in, try to find the lots, just have them drive up on the curb and utilize loading zones. We do have a food distribution that they use the student union loading dock for. And again, students drive in, drive up to the loading dock, somebody jumps out, sticks a bag of food in their car, and then they drive off.
Right.
So yeah, it's all about quick access. We have very little, I mean, there's a couple staff on campus that park in the normal way, but the majority of use on our campus now is all short term.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you checking in, and Happy New Year to everybody there at your campus.
Thanks.
You bet. Who else has got something going on having to do with either parklets, maybe a municipality? And in fact, Donna King just chimed in on chat. Donna's with the city of Paso Robles in California. Donna, would you mind unmuting and talking a little bit about the parklets that you've got in Paso Robles?
Sure. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning.
So in Paso Robles, we have a downtown core area around our park. So the downtown area has approximately 450 on-street spaces that are currently paid parking. We now have about 70 of those that are taken up by more permanent fixture parklets, because we did put the solid barriers. And then we also have the curbside pickup spaces for short term, and those are about 10 or 15 spaces as well. So we definitely have had an impact on our paid parking spaces.
Wow, great. Do you foresee that, Donna, staying fairly permanently, at least through this next year?
It's actually on our city council agenda for tonight
Okay.
to have that discussion, whether those parklets are going to become permanent.
Okay.
They originally were approved for a year when we put them in late spring, early summer. And we are going to be rapidly coming to that year. So the businesses have put some pretty extensive funding into these parklets. They've built some roofs now with the storms, some outdoor heaters and lighting. And the city's been providing those K-rails as well for the permanent barriers. And so we're going to have to discuss whether we're going to make those permanent and who's going to pay for the cost of that.
Right. City provided K-rail, right? That's
correct.
Interesting.
Initially, the proposal was just to put up some temporary closures, cones or rope it off. Mm-hmm. And the police department and the fire department both spoke up at city council mm-hmm. to require that could not be. We were really concerned about the safety, pedestrian safety, as well as because we do have a lot of wineries and breweries in our downtown. We didn't want to be worrying about DUI drivers driving into these parklets with people sitting on them.
Right. That's got to be a significant concern, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. Donna comes from a small to medium size municipality here in California. We had another person raise their hand from a much larger municipality. Sean McCormick is in San Francisco, California. California is represented today so far, aren't they? I would love to hear, Sean, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what's going on in San Francisco at the curb.
So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. In San Francisco, we very similar to what Paso Robles has been doing. They got parklets been installed. We've probably taken about 10% of our parking meter spaces away just for the parklets. We too are considering making some of those permanent. They were approved through the end of December, and then we went through a new application process for anybody to renew to take them to the end of June. But the conversation now is to make them permanent. We've also closed streets to allow more social distancing in residential neighborhoods. Some of those are now being considered to be permanent as well.
Wow.
So those are moving forward in the process. We're actually, it's gonna, it's local traffic only. There'll be a barrier at the beginning of the block of some sort, and the street will then become a permanently closed street. So that's something that's a little bit of a surprise, but the neighbors have been really adopting to those.
It is a
streets you can get out and play.
wow. And by the way, Sean, it's a great action shot today of you
Yeah, I
driving.
know, I'm driving to another meeting. Sorry about that.
Okay, I just want to say you're kind of setting the standard high for us now. We've got to have action. I like it. I like it.
Well, I just crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, but you didn't get me on in time, so I could give you.
Okay.
But we are focused a lot on vaccination sites right now.
Okay.
So we've taken one city college vaccination sites open. It's got 20 lanes, can probably process about 50,000 people a day if it gets to full capacity, if we ever get the vaccination supply worked out. We're going to open another vaccination site in one of our convention centers. So that's going to do another 15,000, but that's going to impact street parking and as well. And then we're looking at opening a third mass vaccination site at a building in our produce market area. And that's all going to be walk up on that one. So it won't be drive up. So we're actually closing streets to create parking for about 500 cars so that people can park and walk to the vaccination sites. So there's a lot of impact to the curb just because the vaccination sites are opening. We've taken away some surface parking lots that were city owned and created some community vaccination sites already as well.
Wow.
So it's just been a busy week.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens as for all of us as the year goes on, and assuming, fingers crossed that vaccines are distributed and we start to see businesses getting a little busier. Some of the municipalities that are taking away the curb permanently, I think it will be watching. So that's great. Thank you, Sean. Now, one of the cities in Colorado, Boulder specifically, Leo mentioned that the parklets there are going to be, it says, in the row until the 31st of 2021. Leo, would you mind unmuting and talking a little bit about what's happening in Boulder right now at the curb?
Yeah, sure. So we've got quite a few parklets throughout the downtown area of Boulder and up on the University Hill area.
Okay.
They had to get permits in the summer of 2020 and had approval for it and started establishing that. We removed a couple streets so that it could be, park benches and everything on the street. And that's one block has stayed permanently that way.
Okay.
And the rest are, looks like they're approved now with City Council to be in the right of way until October 31st of this year. If you want to see a little out the window here, there's some of the parklets here in Boulder.
Well, look at that. Now, see, you just had to one-up Sean McCormick and give us a
live shot, action shot.
That's great. That's great. So are you, when we're talking about interacting with the public in these areas, is your team having any complaints about the parklets, or is it generally supported and appreciated?
Yeah, it's definitely generally supported. It was interesting because some small businesses wanted to have a parklet just to have them. And so they removed some spaces, but they never used them.
Okay.
And city, we want that to be a usable space. So we've set certain parameters to see that they're being used and that everybody's being able to stay safe.
That's great. Leo, thank you for sharing. I sure appreciate that.
Sure.
Donna also mentioned, she spoke about Paso Robles, California. She said, we also have an impact to parking in one of their industrial areas from a temporary warehouse facility that is making PPE with a contract through August of 2021. Thanks for that ad. Yeah, there's a lot of different things happening based on the pandemic. When it comes to, again, use of the curb that we've seen in the last year and the changes that you've experienced, whether you're at a campus, an airport, a city, anybody else have something to share about curb use? Give that one more second. Okay. Not too late. So if you do have something, we can always go back to it. But I'd like to talk a little bit about what has been talked about briefly during this curb management, where you heard a couple of our folks talking about either vaccination sites, or I know some of you have had testing facilities in either structured parking, raised parking decks, and also in surface parking lots. My question to you is, what are some of the auxiliary services or uses that your organization has had in parking facilities, whether it's that or some other kind of storage? Early on in the pandemic, we heard from some campuses and municipalities that were storing rental vehicles that were usually out being used. These companies suddenly had a mass amount of vehicles to store because nobody was renting cars. So those are some examples. Could somebody either raise their hand or enter into chat that they've got something that they'd be willing to share about how their lots or structures are being used? And Justin, if you have somebody that raises their hand and I'm not seeing it, if you wouldn't mind just unmuting and letting us know. And I am going to call on, we have some friends here from the city of Houston. Is anybody willing to talk about what Houston is dealing with in reference to use of parking facilities during this time? I know they signed up. Maybe they are not here. All right. Let me take one quick look here. And I see Don Norte is here. Don, I just called on you. Sorry about that, my friend. Are you experiencing in your municipality any use of parking by something other than those using it for parking? Whoop, if you can unmute, if you're able to unmute, Don.
If I have, we're seeing a lot of increase in like film permits and things like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And tell everybody where you are. What city?
Yeah, but they don't know this. What do you mean?
Well, not everybody knows where you work. Sorry.
I work for LA Metro.
Right. Wonderful. One of our other large cities here. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Okay, Josh mentioned, and Josh, I don't know if you're able to unmute. Josh Cantor, George Mason University. He said, besides COVID testing, we've been holding drive-in movies. Are you able to unmute and share with us, Josh?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of places now, we started getting requests for outdoor space to be used since indoor events were very limited. So, we worked with our student involvement office and had a series of drive-in movies in the fall. for homecoming next week, where we normally would have a huge homecoming event in one of our parking lots before our basketball game with only 250 people attending the game. We're having a game watch party in the parking lot using the same concept. As I mentioned, we've been very lenient with and flexible with contractors. Often I have to be creative in finding laydown areas for construction projects, and we've been able to provide them much closer access. So it's helped some of the construction projects while we're, 80% empty. And like I said, the other is, just trying to, still try to follow our rules, still sell permits, do all the stuff that we do, but also just try to be very flexible with the uses of our space, knowing that we have a commodity that most don't have access to. And as John mentioned, last fall I gave up a garage for vaccination testing. We're heavily involved in vaccination clinics, like a lot of places. So again, it's one of those just, but the hard part though is as you get all these requests, it's still trying to make sure though you take care of your primary audience. Again, whether it's your, it's your patrons that are coming to your businesses, your students, your employees, whatever it is, it's easy to go overboard with all these kind of requests and kind of neglect your primary customers. So just I try to be mindful and remind our administration that, those are still our primary customers, despite all the great other things that we want to do. I can't displace, students just because we want to have a vaccination clinic. So
I get it. Josh, thank you for sharing that. Now, yeah. Jason Thomas, are you able to unmute and talk a little bit about something that you've experienced?
Sure.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
Fine. Will you tell everybody where you work?
Sure. I'm with Penn State University.
Thank you. And
yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please. I was going to just say, go ahead. Very interesting that what you entered.
Yeah. So two things that I wrote in the chat. One is there's been some talk off and on from a few different departments with interest of being able to set up tents in parking lots for outdoor events that might typically be held indoors. Orientation events is one thing that's been brought up. And another one that I actually just got an email about as we've been having this call that may materialize is usually in the spring, they have some kind of pre-orientation events for sort of last grab at trying to get prospective students to commit to the university in the spring. And those are usually pretty large events, and they're having to rethink how they do those, and they're talking about having using a parking lot that we have next to the admissions office to hold those events. So I think that will happen. It'll be interesting. We haven't really done that before, but the event that came up, and it wasn't a big one. It wasn't even advertised. It was just invited guests. It was mainly like the local Democratic Party, and I think some like the Student Democratic Party on campus was for Vice President Harris's husband in the lead up to the event. And they basically, this is again an event that probably would have normally taken place in the student union or in some indoor space on campus. I think it was in October. And instead, to try to do it socially distanced, they wanted to use a parking lot, and they essentially set up like a flatbed truck and had a makeshift stage on there with invited guests, socially distanced in the parking lot. So yeah, it was kind of a unique event that we haven't had before, and it worked out well. We didn't have any issues with it, but one of just the unexpected things that has come up during the pandemic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amber Kohlberg from the city of Columbus, Ohio. I know you're on the call today. Can you share with us, is there any impact or different use happening with your parking in Columbus, Ohio? If you're willing to unmute.
Sure. So we don't really manage any parking garages or facilities. We do have some of our meters that have been pulled so that we can have the on-street dining occur. We don't have very many of those. Okay. And the city's currently in the works on getting that approved for next year as well.
Is that primarily, if you don't mind me, a follow-up question? I think you call it the short north. Is that the correct term?
Yes.
Is that the area where you're pulling meters? Just curiosity.
Yes, the majority of the approved on-street dining is in the short north. We have some just safety setups so that way the streets have to be certain miles per hour. So it kind of falls in the short north area.
Okay. And it's a vibrant gathering spot, and you've got lots of restaurants for anybody that's not familiar with the short north area of Columbus.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Moira Bedner from UT, oh my gosh, University of Tennessee. Oh, goodness sakes. What city are you in, Moira?
Knoxville.
Knoxville. Thank you. My God, I was drawing a complete blank, but I saw that you were on here today. Hey, anything going on your campus in Knoxville?
We are getting, we're actually having our first community vaccine clinic next week, coordinated with the health department and the police department. So Mark tapped me on the shoulder yesterday and basically said, oh, didn't we do a map for that? And I said, we've got a map that takes them right where they need to go already in our system. We just need to update it for this.
Okay.
So, we're providing like logistical support on that sort of stuff. But like many people, we've got, our bus system is dead quiet. We do have about 25% students taking in-person classes this term, and that's up from about 15%.
Okay.
But we still, it's very, very quiet. We do have special events with basketball and a few other sports that have kicked into gear, but mostly it's so quiet. It's crazy.
Yeah.
One thing actually Mark and I were talking about the other day was the challenge that when we get ready to ramp up again, how hard it's going to be because it's been so quiet. But something I read over the weekend that I thought was really interesting was it was a comparison of something to a gospel reading about the road to Emmaus. And they ask the person, don't you know what's going on? And the apostles, tell the story, but then they said, and they hoped. And one of the challenges I can see us coming into is that we're all hoping it goes back to what it was, but it is going to be profoundly changed in some way, because some people are still going to feel like I need to work from home. I need to Zoom, and so sometimes we kind of go on this, oh yeah, if we can just get back to quote unquote, when it was normal, when we came back to the 1950s, when everything was just fine.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting summer, I think, that if the vaccine does play out and there's more supply and we're able to kind of get back going, what that new normal looks like. And one thing that we may want to think about in the summertime was how do we really re-engage our staff to go from 35, 40% to back to 100%.
Right. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. Moira makes a good point. Excuse me. I was having a conversation with a large university this last week. And one of the things that they've noticed is their parking demand is great and their supply is limited. I think we can all relate to that, right? To some degree. And they were saying there have been so many allowances and they've been opening up so many areas and zones to folks who could not previously park that close, that proximity. And as they start to see the folks come back to their campus, they're having to re-educate their population on the limitations. And they believe they are doing the right thing. They have done the right thing as far as proximity all these months, but they're re-challenged with education and taking away permissions as folks have come back to campus. Other campuses that I've talked to never opened it up and took a lot of heat, and they're still happy with that decision because they're not dealing with it as people are coming back. But anybody else, whether you're municipal, university, or other, dealing with that shift in how you're using your parking supply? And I know there's always a delay. Oh, yes. Oh, no, sorry. I thought we had somebody else popping in here. I'm gonna call on you unexpectedly, but Gary Smith in Arkansas. Gary, are you experiencing any changes of either how you assign parking or allow parking or use of your facilities for things other than parking right now?
We had a request to do a COVID testing in one of our garages. And we have a few spaces designated for that. And that's worked out well. They wanted to do a vaccine clinic in the garage, and we worked out another option for them in a remote parking lot.
Okay.
Our concern in the garage was a vaccine clinic would have backed up all the traffic going through the garage. But putting them in a remote lot that's not being used, a large 1,400 space lot, worked great.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So otherwise, we haven't changed our rules a lot. We've been asked to look at it. Our concern is the same issue is we open it up and let them do something different. Then next fall, we're already planning for normal operation.
Wow.
So if we make that change now, then we've got to turn around and re-educate them again. And then they want to know, well, why could they and they can't now?
Exactly. And, you know, and thank you, Gary. I think that this is not just a university issue. There are municipalities that are dealing with education or re-education as well. Donna even popped in again from Paso Robles that she says that it feels like we are challenged with re-education every month as our world continues to shift. And that's so true. And as Frontline for your organizations, whether you're Frontline or whether you're speaking on behalf of some Frontline staff, what are you experiencing in reference to public re-education as far as parking goes? Joseph Madison had mentioned in there that he would be willing to speak. Joseph, would you mind unmuting and talk about this?
So I was kind of commenting on the fact that we have found, and I'm at Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia, in the Atlanta metro region. We're about 40 miles north of Atlanta. Our utilization and usage, because classes are hybrid, we don't have as many students and faculty staff on campus at the same time. However, we did see facilities take advantage of the slow period to do construction projects that were necessary. Okay. So someone mentioned lay down areas for projects. We've got over 100 and something spaces offline just for new construction. And in that, we've also learned that some of our off-campus remote locations were available for uses we didn't think of. We've been contacted by movie crews here in at the Hollywood of the South.
Yeah.
To do filming and set up for maybe a day or two. And, you know, it gives us opportunities to see how much bigger our regular operations could be on those days where we may have full enrollment, full students, full demand, but maybe on a Saturday when we don't have football, what other uses we could get from those surface lots?
Right. We're sort of taking a new view of our supply, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you shared. Thank you. And Happy New Year to you. You're here.
To you as well.
Hey, one more before you go, Joseph. You mentioned about construction, and I kind of want to tie into this with others too.
Yes.
100 spaces approximately offline right now for lay down or construction. What's your overall parking supply amount? Do you know approximately?
12,000 spaces.
Okay.
Plus or minus a lot.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I just wasn't sure. I was trying to get an idea if you had 100 offline, you know, a percentage or impact on that. That's good.
So we're two campuses, and that's on one campus.
Oh, okay.
So we have roughly 16,000 spaces, but having one complete lot, we may have to reassign from residential or from faculty staff to students, and find ways to navigate the perception of parking availability.
Yeah.
is the reality that there's plenty of space. You just don't want to walk from the furthest space in the lot.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And it's funny about lay down yards for construction when they take up our parking. They're never taking up the parking that nobody wants, are they?
No, but I absolutely, after watching some of these projects, I understand why it's just not feasible.
Correct.
Because of the distance between from one site to the next, but I'd love to see them find solutions to making sure people do find that last space in the lot is something valuable.
Right, exactly. And thank you for sharing that. I know you've got a lot of folks across the nation listening to you right now, nodding their heads and agreeing and they get it. That's great.
Thanks, Dennis.
Good, thank you. Hey, Jason Thomas at Penn State, would you weigh in on this before we wrap this conversation up?
Sure. We've tried to make some adjustments to some just to recognize the fact that we've got so much parking inventory on campus that's not being used. And when you have people who have permits for certain areas that don't normally get access to that area, or maybe don't normally have the opportunity to have that permit. And then there's some angst when those that do have to come to work see that that's empty. What we've done is we tried to provide some additional access to some people, but still maintain equity within how our permit prices are set up. So that was one of our big concerns, especially early on in the pandemic, where we fortunately had university support in the first couple of months where the university was essentially closed, but yet our employees were still paying for parking and our offices weren't open to actually have permits returned. The university leadership basically told all employees, you will continue to pay for parking if you're still being paid by the university. So not everyone liked that, but it was very good support from higher up leadership for us to know that they kind of had our backs in that. But one of the things we offered right away during that period, we had construction projects that were resuming as the state was giving permission for people to do that. Yep. But we thought, we're telling all of our employees they have to pay for parking, but all these contractors are going to come to campus. We're not going to be here to sort of make them buy permits. So one kind of creative thing we did is we worked with Park Mobile to offer monthly permits that contractors would normally buy in our office virtually through the Park Mobile site. And though certainly not everyone did that, we could at least say that, you know, we were providing an option and communicating to all these contractors that they needed to do that. And then probably the other big thing is we've reutilized some student parking. So we've offered student parking to faculty staff who have like kind of our core permit without paying an additional rate. And the other dynamic is we have a parking garage being built on campus right now, and the construction started a few months prior to the pandemic. We had some major challenges with where we were going to relocate some of the people who were being displaced while that garage was being built, because it was being built on a huge surface parking lot. So we have reallocated people to some new areas, partnered with State College Borough to add areas. We had to take a student permit option away. But the pandemic ended up decreasing the demand so much that we actually didn't have to do all those things. So there was one sort of strange benefit in that, like the student permit option we had taken away, we were able to reoffer this year because we didn't have the demand crises that we thought we were going to have while that garage was being constructed. And some faculty staff that we displaced, we were able to move them back closer. So we tried to just be flexible and not be locked into prior changes and be willing to do some new things. And knowing that next year we may not be able to do those things again.
I get that. Thank you for sharing that. That's good information. Looking towards the north, I also see that Melina Morakovich from British Columbia, Canada, is on the call. Melina, are you willing to share what's going on in your region having to do with use of parking or parklets, anything like that? If you're willing to unmute, or able to unmute, I should say. All right, she possibly cannot do that. Rachel, is it Lankow? In Toronto, are you able to unmute and share?
Yeah.
Hi, good morning and happy,
Hi.
or good afternoon and happy new year.
Yeah, so we're based out of Toronto, Canada. I'm not with a city or school. I'm with Honk. But what we've seen, especially in Canada, is that most campuses have been a hybrid, but like maybe like 15, 20% have been on campus. So it's been very quiet.
Are they doing any either testing or vaccination sites that you're aware of in your region?
Not yet, because vaccinations have been quite slow to roll out here. But probably March, April, as the kind of vaccine programs start to ramp up, we'll probably see that more here as well.
Perfect. Good. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for letting me just call on you without knowing I was going to do that. I appreciate it. So Anthony Rock, who is on the call today, had a question that he had asked earlier online. And his question, and Anthony, join me here if you don't mind unmuting. And I'll say what your question was as you wrote it, but if you want to add to it. So he wanted to know with how other agencies are adapting to almost everything being online or virtual, nothing written, no real hard documents that we can necessarily hold on to if we're working remotely. And I think he's looking for input from others. Anthony, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'm from the University of Vermont, and really we went from being almost all having the permits be done through paper to having it done online last fall when there was a lot of issues. We've done most of those issues now, but it's mostly people that are in the office, not in the office, and new staff that maybe are not used to doing it this way, and just kind of helping them out in any ways that people that have gone through this already previously can provide some assistance.
Terrific. Good. And thank you. I'm hoping that there are some folks from agencies across the nation that can provide you some answers. If you have an answer for Anthony, feel free to either raise your hand, unmute, or enter your response into chat, whatever you're comfortable with. And thanks, Anthony, for doing that. And in fact, while we're waiting for any answers that would be helpful to Anthony having to do with that, I want to ask another question. And I'm going to ask it by launching, oh, Anthony, is this for parking permits? Angel's wondering.
Yes, it is. It's for faculty, staff, student, everybody, vendors. The only thing that was mostly done online before was our visitor permits, which used the event software that the rest of campus used. Everything else was done paper form besides that.
Okay, great. That's great. And Donna King is mentioning that pay by plate is the way to go. That's been very successful for them. While you're contemplating an answer that might be helpful to Anthony, I want to ask you another poll question, if you wouldn't mind. So let me go ahead and launch this. Sorry, just 1 second. I'm going to launch it right now. And here's my question for you. When you think about your organization, which of the statements on the screen right now most closely represents where you are as it relates to collaboration within the team that you work with? How are you staying in touch? You've got the 75% of you have folks working in the office and working at home, some combination of the two. And yet we need to share information. How are you doing that? What are your collaboration tools? Are you using a software program, say like Microsoft Teams, as an example, not a promotion, to keep everybody connected? So you'll see that your choices on the screen are, first one is that your organization was successfully using an online collaboration tool, some program, or a chat program prior to the pandemic. The second choice, you've implemented or upgraded your online collaboration tool or chat program since the pandemic. And the third option or third choice is that you're not currently using an online collaboration tool or chat program. Remember, when you answer these polls, they're anonymous. Nobody sees that it's you or what you've said about it. But I will share the results here in just about a minute. It's interesting. I'm going to talk about this while we're waiting for everybody to respond. Online collaboration, because we are all working in different spots, has become sort of necessary, not mandatory, but necessary. And many of the agencies that are on the line today had a chat program that they never used or a collaboration tool that they never used. And suddenly we've had to rely on it quite a bit. And so I'm going to ask for anybody that is willing to talk about that to enter into chat that you're willing to talk about how that collaboration tool is working for your organization. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results so that you can see what the majority of folks are doing. Again, over time, this question or the answers to this question have changed. When I first asked this question, by and large, folks were either using it before question or the answer A, or were not using it, an online collaboration tool. Now, the largest group, 68% of you, have either implemented or upgraded your collaboration tool or chat program within your organization. Again, pretty interesting, not surprising, but again, with our groups sharing so much that they're working remotely, this is not really a surprise. Who is willing to share about their collaboration tool that they're using or how it's working for them? Irma Henderson, I know you are on the line today, and I was wondering if you are or your organization is using a collaboration tool to stay connected and communicate on a frequent basis.
Yeah, I want to say that sometimes the problem is being at a university, different people use different systems. So right now on my laptop, I have WebEx, Skype, Teams, and Zoom, depending on who is setting up a meeting. And I think that there's, it's the difficulty of now we're inundated with ways to collaborate online, and having to either pick one and be consistent, or having to teach ourselves and our staff how to navigate through each. Because I mean, same thing with file sharing. When you think about things like SharePoint or Google Docs or Box or Dropbox, I mean, it's that unfortunately or fortunately, there are several ways to be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Irma. I appreciate that. Now, Summer Howard mentioned that they utilize Teams to include all of their employees in shifts to better organize who's responsible for phones, emails, etc., while working from home. Joseph Madison was also curious about anyone using collaboration tools with their field teams. John Orr with Cal State Los Angeles said that they are doing biweekly Zooms with field personnel. Philip O'Neill also mentioned that he's, much like Irma, using all four of those tools. Mary Mabry, Slack and Monday.com is something that they've been using. It's been a huge benefit to them. They've had them in place prior, but have utilized them even more than before, especially with team support, project management, etc. Dennis Sotomayor, also with CSU Los Angeles, mentioned Zoom and Dropbox is something that they're using the most. Thank you all for weighing in on that. I do appreciate that. Anybody else have something? Oh, okay, let's see. Joseph also mentioned that he uses shifts in Teams to keep track of who was in the office and who was working from home at the start of the pandemic. Wonderful. Anyone else having to do with collaboration tools or how they're staying connected as a team, how they're collaborating? All right. I want to ask one last question because, believe it or not, we're almost out of time. I want somebody to share some good news. Tell me something that has happened in the last year that is positive. We have lots of things that we can look at and identify as a negative, as impactful in a negative way. But I know some of you have also experienced some things that are particularly good. Tell me what that would be. Now, Summer Howard, will you talk about what you just put into chat? Would you mind unmuting?
Sure. Well, as we all know, it was a very challenging year. So enforcement wise, we actually had our employees drop like flies because they were the ones that were out there trying to do all the enforcing. And then everybody else in the office, we actually got lucky because we had the ability to work from home, and this extra flexibility increased the odds of keeping all of our employees around. It also helps that they've all been here close to 4 years, which is very rare for front desk at parking. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing. See, I know there's some good news out there, and some of you are, if you're not paying attention to chat, other people have been listing things in chat. Actually, Josh Cantor, would you mind if I call on you again? Would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, while things are slow and even with money tight, we've tried to take advantage to do some pilot projects. And the funny thing is that, even if they don't work out well, since we're dealing with a much smaller audience, the failures won't be as large. So, again, we're hopeful it's that we're able to actually do some pilot projects on a more manageable scale with it being slow. So.
Wow. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Hey, Gabriel Hoxie, I noticed that you just mentioned that you were able to bring brand new buses this week. Would you talk a little bit about the electric buses and what you've been able to do? That is good news.
My name's Gabriel Hoxie. I'm one of the frontline staff. I usually do COVID testing, but Duke University, where I work, we have a carbon policy.
Whoops. Looks like Gabriel just froze up. I don't know if that's for everybody. We'll come back to him if he's able to rejoin us.
Yes, I believe that's it. And the 40 passenger buses, but they're completely electric.
Okay, terrific. 250 plus miles for buses. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's a 40 passenger, over 250 miles of pure electric. So you don't have to worry about buying gas or oil or any of that. It's less parts in these buses. So it's less maintenance. So I think we have about 24 buses right now, but we just bought these 2 brand new ones. Actually, this week or last week, we were featured by a National Park Association, I think.
Is wonderful. Really, really glad to hear it. And that's a very positive thing for the environment. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Joseph Madison, calling on you one more time. You mentioned that KSU's experienced some awesome growth. Talk about that.
So we've been upgraded in the type of research institution that we were in the past 2 years. And that's attracted a few more students to our campus. We now have registered about 41,000 students across both of our campuses, both online, offline, and in the graduate level and beyond courses. So we've been excited to partake in a different kind of growth throughout the region, because while most people are not enrolling or not showing up on campus, we still have been able to see some increase in student enrollment, which means we get to positively impact the lives of so many people.
Thank you for sharing that. And that is positive. I don't know, I just always like to end on a positive note. Listen, believe it or not, our time today has already come to an end. So I want to thank you all for being here, but I want to tell you 2 great things. First of all, next week starts our sessions, our frontline fundamental sessions are back. I'm so excited about this. For all of our member organizations, it is free for all of your staff from wherever they're working. Again, we know they're working remotely and in the office. But next week, we roll out our first session this same time period. It'll be next Tuesday, February 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, noon Mountain, and 11 Pacific. Our speaker next week is going to be, she's dynamic, she's wonderful. Her name is Sylvia Martinez Malali, and she is going to make data interesting. One of the things that she and I talked about, her session is titled "The Recovery Will Be Digitized, Using Data to Get There Faster." This brings in why data matters, or how it's interesting, or should be, or could be, to our frontline staff. If you haven't registered, please register. Remember, it's free. I can't wait to see you all. Take a look on the IPMI website to see what the sessions are coming up. We're going to have 2 every month. I hope you can join us. I think they're interesting. But then again, I'm kind of a parking geek, so I do think this stuff is interesting. But I will tell you this, not every session that we have is all on an industry topic. There's some things that are just important to us personally, and I hope you find them rewarding and enriching. If I can ever be of help to you, please get in touch with me. My email is campbell@parking-mobility.org, and I can't wait to see you all for the rest of this year. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for participating, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.